For it, man.
Go ahead and fire it up. Get that in there. What's
Fire it
going
up.
on, friends of the channel? We are back with the Conscious Approach Show on YouTube. Thank you once again for joining. We appreciate everybody who is a part of the Conscious Approach community. As always, my name is JV Wins, and I'm joined by my good friend Dogon SS. Before we get started with the proceedings this evening, I did want to say that if you have not already done so, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you can get that notification whenever new content is published to the channel. We certainly appreciate it. And if you're so inclined, go ahead and hit that like button. And as I always like to say, feel free to join in on the conversation. Go ahead and comment. Let us know what you think about these various topics. We do pay attention and engage as long as they are not of the troll variety. We currently have a standing goal of 1,000 subscribers. And, you got to crawl before you walk. 1,000 subscribers is small time to the big YouTubers out there, but we don't pray tell to be big YouTubers, at least not at this point. So always want to get that little disclaimer out there, man. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all the new subs who have been coming in over the course of the last couple of weeks, and we anticipate to grow more as we continue to evolve this community. And we don't want to grow followers because you agree with everything we do. We just want to grow followers because you appreciate the content that we put out. Agree or disagree. We ain't trying to run a cult over here.
Yeah.
With that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, we're going to talk about the Champagne Poppy, aka Drake, who
Drake.
had some interesting comments about how he can relate to big-breasted women. So everybody has a podcast nowadays. There is a new YouTube show that is called Future Mood. Future Mood is the name of this new YouTube show. I'm not exactly sure who the proprietor of this show is, but it's backed by some pretty substantial muscle because the first episode of this show, which is called The Moody Conversation, features hip hop stars Drake and Lil Yachty. And so
Oh,
what caught our interest on this particular first episode of Future Mood is comments made by Drake and how he relates to quote him, women with big titties.
nice.
Those are Drake's words. And so we found this pretty interesting. It allows us to sort of gain a glimpse into the mind of Drake and how he navigates. I'm guessing he's talking about women in his crazy world as a hip hop star. So we thought that this was interesting. It sort of aligns with some of the stuff that we like to talk about on this channel. So I'll go ahead and play this, and we will discuss how much sense Drake is making when he talks about how much he can relate to big-breasted women. And is what he's saying sensible at all, or is this just Drake being Drake? So we'll play this, and then we'll talk about it.
I did talk to a therapist one time, and he made this point about being like, no matter what kind of woman you're chasing physically, right? Like
Mhm.
you like ass, you like titties, you like. He's like, you have the biggest tits in the room. He's like, you walk into any room and you have just the most gigantic tits. Nobody can think about anything else other than whatever your gigantic tits, which is your Drake. I remember this about this guy. I remember that about this guy. I bet this guy does this. I bet this guy does that. Like all the preconceived notions, they're just like they can't see past the gigantic tits unless they talk to you, and then they're like, "Oh wow, like you're actually like I mean your tits are huge, but you're super smart,
Right.
or like you're really nice
Yeah,
and
yeah,
kind."
yeah.
So it's interesting to that's why I relate to girls with huge tits.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Very nice dialogue there.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it, man. So yeah, and this came from a therapy session. So Drake's therapist tried to, I guess he was helping him through trying to understand what, you know, the reaction to you is juxtaposed to people who are trying to get at you from an attention seeking standpoint. And we can relate that to the way women with, and I'm, sort of injecting my I'm trying to make some sense into. I guess you can extrapolate large breasts into other features. So the girl with the biggest butt, or the girl with the cutest face, or the girl with all the other things that I guess men pay attention to, and how, I guess you're only fixating on these things and not even taking into account that this individual is a whole person. So I don't know if Drake was fishing for sympathy in that regard, but an interesting analogy nevertheless that came from his therapist on that. Um, uh, what did you make of what Drake had to say about relating to women with large breasts?
I think it's genius. I co-sign his therapist. I like his hands-on technique when it comes to applying philosophies or theories that are tangible to their client. And one thing about Drake, he understands titties or boobs. Right. So now he's like, now how am I going to get Drake to understand that he's the biggest boobs in the room? Um, how am I going to get that to him? And then, by knowing Drake, knowing who he is, knowing what how he ticks and what makes him go, he was like, "Nah, I know Drake loves his women, so let me relate this to women." Uh, I do the same when it comes to people that I'm talking to, and I'm trying to help them understand a point that I get, but it's more or less a principle. I'm like a principle concept general person. And so when I'm trying to explain a concept to somebody and they're like, I don't know, I can't do it. And it's like, you already do this in other areas of your life. So then I try to find areas where, a common thing, something that they do or love, a sport, cooking, anything, where I can go, okay, so you like to cook. So then I'll relate the situation to cooking. So Drake, like I said, man, he loves his ladies. And for whatever reason, he couldn't get it through his thick noggin that whenever he walks in a room, that, like you said, people, he can't really decipher, who really wants something from him, who wants to really get to know him, or the people who actually get to know him are surprised that he's actually cool. And he couldn't really develop or digest these concepts. But one thing about his therapist, like I said, he did a great job of making it palatable for Mr. Drake there. And I tend to agree. I think it's a spot on analogy. If Drake walked into any job I've ever had, all right, any party I've ever been to, okay, it would have shut the place down. All right. And now, granted, the biggest boobs in the room is not going to shut down a whole club like Drake would shut down a club. But you get the gist of it. Like if we're
Yeah.
in a if we're in a close quarter situation, if Drake walks in the room, I mean, everybody's over there to him. I mean, it's like, hey, Dogon, hey, everybody on my corner, hey, yeah, hey, I'm Dogon. Yeah. As soon as Drake walks in, everybody's right on over there. So yeah, man, I can attest to that, and I agree. Very nice philosophy there. I agree.
Yeah, maybe the biggest boobs won't shut down the whole club that we're in, but if me and you are at a strip club and the
Yeah,
biggest boobs walk in the room or the biggest ass walks in the room, it'll shut that place down.
agreed.
It's entirely based on the environment that you're occupying in that moment in time. Drake is like, um, Drake's been talking about this stuff since his first album. Hell, he's been talking about this since his mixtape. So like before he even became Drake, like when he was still Degrassi Aubrey Graham, he was talking
Yep.
about this kind of stuff. So like he before this whole transactional nature of relationships became more of a mainstay in American society, I would say. Drake was talking about this. So, one could argue that he was actually a prophet in this regard, um, because when he was experiencing this, he was experiencing it from a celebrity context,
Mhm.
but it's obviously infiltrated the masses from the stamp unto which it doesn't necessarily take being a famous person or a celebrity in order to experience this. It's now certainly a part of day to day life if you're out here. trying to navigate this situation. But Drake was talking about this on the So Far Gone. He was talking about it on Thank Me Later. He was talking about it on the what was the name of the album that he had? Is it Take Care? The one he had the Lord Knows song with Rick Ross, and he was talking about this on his verse on that song. Like, yeah, I don't think his unless he's been going to therapy this entire time. I don't think this is a revelation that was made to him through going to therapy. Maybe his therapy just helped put a bow around it, but he kind of understood what was going on. I would say even before he started going to therapy. Like I said, unless he's been going to therapy this entire time, I think it just this kind of speaks to like no one really cares anymore. And maybe this is me being cynical. Maybe this is the cynical part of me coming out. But like
Yeah.
everyone does this. Like Drake is right. Drake is really a mouthpiece for what I think has infiltrated the masses of the American collective consciousness, which is your relationship with an individual 9 times out of 10 unfortunately isn't genuine anymore, and people form relationships based upon what they perceive can be extracted from you. And with Drake being at the top of the mountaintop, his interactions with women, I would imagine, are almost exclusively disingenuous, where it's all based upon his persona and his music and his lyrics and his cachet and his social prestige, and less about how funny or intelligent or smart he is. Especially in the circles that he runs in, those women don't give a damn about how smart you are. Because if it's a guy who's really smart but isn't Drake, or a guy who's Drake but not so smart, they're gonna go for the guy who's Drake but not so smart. So no one cares about any of that stuff anymore. Intangibles, morals, and ethics and values, who cares? It just matters how many millions of Instagram followers you have and how I can hitch my wagon to an individual like Drake. And Drake, who to me always struck me as, so there are a few hip hop stars who I have always identified as identity crisis rappers. We've talked about this a couple times. Like Wale to me has always struck me as an identity crisis rapper, especially when he first started doing the MMG thing. He didn't know whether he wanted to be the street guy rapping about hammers, or whether he wanted to be the introspective poet rapping about life and
Hammers.
philosophy. You know, and J. Cole to a certain extent to me is an identity crisis rapper along the same lines of Drake. Neither one of them are going to pretend to be tough guys like Wale tried to do, but they're going to experience this identity crisis when it comes to women, because I feel like at their core, they're guys with values and integrity, but they're living in a world where it pays to not have those things, especially when it comes to women. And so I think on a day to day basis, Drake is trying to reconcile that. And he uses his music to try and reconcile it, really to no avail, because it doesn't help him. Because more often than not, he finds himself consorting with the women who he raps about, and who he is trying to understand how to not get sucked into a world in which these are the women that I'm dealing with. Because I, a person who, at least initially as a human being, was on the integrities and morals and principled side, am still trying to double dip and be moral and principled and have integrity, even though I'm a hip hop star and I'm living in hip hop world where morals, principles, and integrity can work to one's detriment. Especially if you want to juxtapose it to your potential earnings and how much fame you got. Because I would argue that the rappers who decided to stick to their guns and not deviate from their morals and integrity and their principles are the guys who make the least amount of money, are the least famous, and probably get the least amount of quote unquote bad bitches. And I think in a perfect world, and of course I'm projecting here, I don't know Drake personally, but I would imagine that if the world was perfect, Drake could be Black Thought or De La Soul or, Common, or if Skill Soul, truth be told, I'd probably be lyrically Talib Kweli, like Jay-Z said. I think in
Mm-hmm.
a perfect world, Drake probably envisions himself doing these things, but we're in an imperfect world and he's hip hop megastar and he can't do both. So he's chosen to do the hip hop star thing, but there's a part of him that still tries to reconcile that duality. And there's no real way to do that, nor should there be, because this world is inherently imperfect. So he reconciles it, or at least attempts to do so through his music, much to no avail. And I feel for him. But on the outset, I do agree with the analogy that his therapist posed to him, because he is the biggest boobs in the room whenever he walks in. And I think that it serves him best to keep that in mind and not, fall into some of the trappings that some of his contemporaries have fallen into.
Well said. And as far as the analogy and all of that stuff goes, well, let me stick to this and piggyback off what you just mentioned. So yeah, I agree with him juggling the fact that he wants some level of normality, traditionalism, if you will, with one woman or a committed, strong relationship. You're gonna do his thing on the side, but he wants one loyal woman type of thing that's there actually for him. But like you said, man, in today's modern world with fame and the way new people are set up anyway, the way new relationships are going, things are more transactional than ever before. Who can you really trust when you're on his level or plateau? So, yeah, it's a tough thing, man, when you were raised to want to be with a person for the rest of your life, a person. And then now you got a whole bunch of people, but nobody really there for you because, well, they only with you because you got double F's or triple E's. And
Right.
so now it's just like, hey man, it sucks. It really I agree with you. I feel for him on that. But be that as it may, okay, he takes Scrooge McDuck showers while I'm around here okay, finding love, air quote, right? Yeah, right. Cuz like we talk about every other week nowadays, right? When it comes to modern dating and relationships, and if you're dealing with somebody who agrees with today's modern philosophies, if you don't make Drake-esque money, she's not going to want to be with you anyway. you know Now you don't need Drake money, but you know what I'm saying. You need
Yeah, right.
cash in order to
Right.
function.
Right.
And so Drake is on the other extreme where he's got the cash, and so I guess the best bet would be somewhere in the middle, wherever that's at. But it still sucks that the base and bottom line of everything is still transactional. And I guess it always was that way. Now we just have to deal with the harsh reality of it. I think that's what we're dealing with right now. A lot of harsh
Yeah,
reality is going on in the world. And
I agree.
so when it comes to masculinity, femininity, there's a lot of things being put out there and exposed, and a lot of knowledge. It's They say that this is the age of information. A lot of stuff will be brought to the light. And when I was being told those things, I was always thinking more lines, along the lines of government, this and that. Finally they're about to get exposed, or finally this is about to get exposed, but everything's getting exposed. And so transactional relationships, I think, are really coming to the forefront right now. And if you want to live a transactional lifestyle, just be aware that whoever's with you likes the transactions and not you. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that's a cold game too. But
It,
yeah, man, it's rough. But I always say this thing, man, and I've mentioned this to you guys and the squad. But I have a couple of like analogies or whatever, if you will. You play life how you play basketball. You drive your life how you drive your car. And it's basically just saying that you do everything the same everywhere across the board, but you can objectively view how you drive your car. You can objectively view how you play basketball. It's kind of difficult to objectively view how you do life. But if you look at how you play basketball, oh yeah, I'm a team player. I share, I get the loose balls. This is me. I get the loose balls. I do the stuff that other people don't want to do, and I do that in life everywhere. But I did that on the basketball court. That was very easy for me to see while I played basketball. But then I thought about it, I was like, well, I do that in every area of my life. I do that while I'm driving. I'm a team player while I'm driving. I'm thinking 2 steps or 3 steps ahead while I'm driving, like I did when I played basketball, and so on and so forth. And so yeah, if there's a thing out there that you would like to say, while you're out there driving, and you're seeing how you drive, when you speed up, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're calm, all of these types of things, when you got a near accident, where was your mind? Was your mind thinking about something going on next week, last week, what you got to do later on? So your focus is off. So now so the same thing is in your life. When your focus is off, you're making errors in your life. You can side swipe a car, and that's very obvious, but you can have a side swipe in your life from the same types of things. So it's kind of one of those things where you could just take a objective view of your life, uh, and put yourself in a different position where you can look at yourself third person. And so what his therapist did here was the same thing. It was just like, hey, I get it, Drake. You're Drake. You've been popular and famous damn near your whole life, and I'm trying to get this concept to you, but it's not computing. How about this? And then once he heard that, he was like, ding dong. But like you said, man, when his music, when he first came, because I used to listen to his first couple mixtapes and stuff. Mixtapes, not albums. Didn't like the albums. The mixtapes I thought was fire. But even then, man, the guy was so transparent and everything that he was talking about. The guy was very wise beyond his years especially when it came to rapping that type of stuff too. So yeah, he's always seemed to be in touch with his inner side. And so yeah, like you said, I don't know if this was more recent or if there's something he's been heard of, but yeah, he's kind of always talked like this. But it's still a good analogy to use for the masses, and so young people can go, oh, you know what? Yeah, because everybody has presence. That's Drake. But everybody has presence. You either have a little or you got a lot. All right. So some people have a lot of presence. Whenever I walk in the rooms, it might be the hair, but I be walking around with some uh double E's, and at times there's other rooms where my stuff's like a B. It's like, goddamn. So hey man, it's cool stuff. I feel like it applies to Drake, and I think it was good fodder. I think it was a good conversation, and I like it. Seemed pretty chill. And side note, I was in Walmart today. I know, Jesus. And I was in the frozen section. I saw Lil Yachty's pizzas. Lil Yachty got frozen pizzas in Walmart. So hey
What?
man, shout out to Lil Yachty, man, getting the Walmart bag, the great value money. So
That's new to me. I did not know that. That's new.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and speaking of these types of artists like this, well, I don't know. I don't know too much about Yachty's background or his music, so I couldn't tell you whether Yachty is somebody who experiences this duality or not. That's probably just a part of Yachty's existence. But I know at least for Drake, yeah, he's been doing this for a while. I think it's a unique perspective, and it's definitely something that applies. It applies like circumstantially. So I would say wherever you like, whatever lane in life, because I think everyone has. Now, whether you tap into it or not is a whole other story. But I think most humans have a space that they can occupy in which they would be walking around with double D's. So like a basketball player, for example, if an NBA player walks into a summer league game, that's the equivalent of him having double D's in that kind of environment. All eyes are on you. Everybody's on you. Every encounter that you're going to have with any person is going to have to be measured against who that individual is and what most people want in those types of situations. Um, Women pretty much experience this everywhere just by the sake of their existence because they're women and it is what it is. But like, I think most people have situations based upon their abilities, their talents, what it is that they're good at, their strengths, their weaknesses, knowledge they're in, have situations and environments in which, in this particular context, I'm walking around with double D's and having the wherewithal to be able to gain the understanding of what that means and how you can sort of extrapolate that to how it's going to affect other people can be beneficial to you. And this kind of soundbite from Drake helps for anyone to be able to understand the importance of that. Because if you're a superstar at work, for example, and it can be an office job where you're pushing papers, or it can be a super important job if you're a doctor or a lawyer or something like this. When you go to that medical conference, those are double D's. If you're a lawyer and you go to a big, I don't know what lawyers do. I used to work for landscape architects, and yeah, it's funny too. Like I used to work for the state chapter for landscape architecture. So there's a national chapter. So anybody who's a landscape architect, you're going to be a part of an association because that's how you get your CEUs. That's how you can continue to do your work and all this kind of stuff. And so you're going to be a part of an organization, and these organizations hold annual conferences. I worked for landscape architects in the state of Florida. And so I used to be a part of a team that organized annual conferences for the entire state chapter for the whole, so every company and every individual who was a practicing landscape architect who was a part of the Florida chapter came to the annual meeting. It was the biggest event of the year. And for those individuals, in the environment of a landscape architecture conference, you wouldn't have known the difference between them in that environment and Drake at a hip hop festival. It's the same thing. Those people are rock stars in those environments. Like the biggest landscape architects who work for the biggest landscape architecture firms, like Architectonica is one that I can think of off the top of my head. I used to work with these people every day, and we would go to these different sites where we would host these conferences. We did one in Boca, we did one in Jacksonville, we did one in Orlando, and for the three times that I was a part of the company that did this, and these people, when they showed up at these conferences, were walking around with the biggest nut sacks in the world, the biggest double D's in the world. They were rock stars at these conferences. It looked like they were a famous rapper at a rap show or at a club event or something like this. It was the same thing. So I think comments like what Drake are making can be extrapolated in pretty much any facet of life where you find yourself tapping into whatever gives you or whatever garners for you that kind of attention, and finding the best ways to be able to reconcile it in your mind and easily navigate it are important skills to have. And so, I got my certain feelings when it comes to Drake and his music. Not Drake as a human. I don't know Drake as a human. I only know Drake as a rapper. And when it comes to Drake as a rapper, I have my mixed emotions and feelings when it comes to some of his work and some of the things that he's done and said. But at times he gets introspective enough that I can sort of say, oh, there's the real person there. And I get that. That makes sense. And this was one of those times, and I appreciate that, especially because I'm saying that about a rapper. And I found myself more and more not liking rappers these days. But, when it comes to Drake, it is what it is. And I appreciate those comments. I relate to those sentiments. And I think anyone who can take heed from what he had to say there, much like the analogy that you made about sports or driving, just sort of peel that back in terms of what it is that I'm good at and where do I find myself being the Drake of my environment in whatever that means. And so, sound advice. I side with Drake on that and the therapist. And hopefully we get more sound bites like this from him on these various shows. Because sometimes he's sort of, like I said, he double dips. Sometimes he's Drake, a rapper, and sometimes he's a human. And this was one of the times when he's a human. And other times when he's being a rapper, you can take it or leave it. Usually I leave it, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, and rapper Drake is it's his job, and he feels that way, but it's more like his job. It's kind of like it's like hooping. Is he he is like the biggest known basketball player out there, and he has to talk big and bad, to everybody out there to let everybody know that he's the biggest and baddest basketball player out there. But at the same time, he's a he takes his armor off at times, and in these conversations where it's just like, hey man, he seems like a regular guy. He doesn't seem like the guy out there that hit the dagger and hit the game winner in your face. But
So question real quick.
mhm.
So is rapper Drake, is that his mask? Like Will Smith's mask that he took off?
Well, that's what I'm
Remember when
saying.
we talked about the mask? The
Yeah,
Dave Chappelle talked about Will Smith's mask.
yeah, it's a combo. So that's kind of what I was getting to. So he likes the fact that he's the biggest, baddest basketball player superstar out there, but he also doesn't like the attention and stuff. It's like a burden. But if you like Jordan or somebody else, if there's a one-on-one basketball competition, he's going to try to slit your throat then. So if Drake, he talks all this stuff and yeah, man, I want to be a regular guy. Let somebody make a diss track towards him and challenges his career. He gets very competitive then. And then at that time, it ain't a shield. It's how he really feels. So it's kind of like he's a Jekyll and Hyde
Mhm.
kind of a character. He's both. He loves both. And so that's why he's in this limbo of a situation in his life, because he loves the game, he loves the women, but like you said, at the same time, he was like kind of raised traditional. He wants that traditional stuff, but he can't have both lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think he likes both. I think he likes both.
I do too. I do too. Yeah, interesting comments to be sure, man. Yeah. And yeah, you raised a good point. It's more about analogizing whatever double D breast means to you. That's the biggest takeaway that I get from this is whatever double D breast mean to you, right? So if I think that I'm real good at doing this, now it's I can't really put myself in that. I can't really put us rather in that boat at the moment because we're growing this thing. But I would imagine the biggest YouTubers in the world feel like they can drop their nuts on anybody.
Oh yeah.
Now depending on seriously, but depending on how they came up, maybe there's a dual nature inherent in them where it's like, yeah, when I'm doing this podcasting, I'm dropping nuts, but otherwise, I'm tucking them. And so, there's a duality inherent in all of this. And some of the smarter, more articulate people who are in these lanes, when they speak to it, I think it provides a bit of a breath of fresh air when you juxtapose it to a lot of the rhetoric that comes out of some of this hip hop stuff. So, um, you know, I'll leave it there. But yeah, I think it was interesting comments, and yeah, I think we all have situations and contexts where we have the biggest boobs in the room, and it's important that we all understand what those rooms are for each of us because it's different from one person to the next.
More breast analogies.
Yeah,
We need more. I cannot believe I've never thought of that. So we need more breast analogies.
yeah. Shouts out to Drake's therapist, whoever that is.
Seriously.
I'm pretty sure that's like $10,000 an hour.
I'll charge you 9, Drake. I'll charge
Yeah.
you 9.
Oh man.